the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. We, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustices of our past. Honor those who suffered for justice and freedom in our land. Respect those who have worked to build and develop our country. And believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. We therefore, through our freely elected representatives, adopt this Constitution as the supreme law of the Republic, so as to heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. Lay the foundations for a democratic and open society in which government is based on the will of the people, and every citizen is equally protected by law. Improve the quality of life of all citizens and free the potential of each person. And build a united and democratic South Africa, able to take its rightful place as a sovereign state in the family of nations. May God protect our people. Nkosi Sikeleli Africa. Morena Buluke Sitjhaba sa heso. Kgotsi and South Africa. God bless South Africa. Modimo Fatuchetsa Africa. Nkosi Katekisa Africa.
My word, how beautiful is that? South African children reading the preamble to the Constitution. Goosebumps stuff. We'll be talking about that later on here in the program. But let's start by acknowledging the important guests. Minister Ronald Lamola, Minister for Justice and Correctional Services. Thank you so much. Professor Wim de Villiers, Rector and Vice Chancellor at our host institution, Stellenbosch University. Also our host in the form of both the institution, Stellenbosch University, and the person, Professor Thuli Madonsela, who's the Social Justice Chair and convener for the M-Plan here at the university. Also Professor Nicholas Smith, who's the Dean for the Faculty of Law at Stellenbosch. We have an esteemed lineup of speakers, but in the interest of time, I will introduce them when it's time for them to speak. In the meantime, however, you're welcome to look at our program online to get a sense of who they are. Now, in line with global gender sensitivities, I will not be using the regular ladies and gentlemen, and I hope this is in order. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second annual Social Justice Summit. All hands on deck to leave no one behind in the post-COVID-19 recovery agenda. It's a true honor for me to be here leading this conversation that seeks to address some of the most pressing needs at the moment, couched on access, equity, diversity, participation, and human rights. Every one of us likes to get a sense of success, right? When you haven't achieved this, which is the case in the quest of social justice, the next best thing is progress. And today's session we'll discover is about incremental steps building on last year's inaugural Social Justice Summit while facing new challenges. Now, depending on which part of the world or perspective you're coming from, the most pressing social justice issues for you could be, for instance, gun violence or voting rights, as you've just seen in the United States. So as we hold this conversation, very aware of the global social justice conversations, we're also acutely aware of the urgent necessity to respond to pressing local challenges. 26 years into democracy, South Africa has not been able to shake off racial divisions. COVID-19 has highlighted the unequal access challenge. Our country has a gender-based violence problem. Women have to sacrifice so much, sometimes their lives, in their quest to achieve equal status in their relationships and so on. So, as we lay the ground for what promises to be really interesting exchanges and pronouncements, let's welcome the first of our esteemed lineup of speakers, Professor Wim de Villiers. Professor Wim de Villiers has been Rector and Vice Chancellor since 2015 here at the university when he joined his alma mater again after 21 years abroad. After graduating from Stellenbosch University with an MB CHB, he went to Oxford University for his PhD and then to America, where he held a number of senior positions at the University of Kentucky. He also studied at Harvard and was included in the publication's Best Doctors in America. On the national stage, he serves as the Vice Chair of the Universities of South Africa and Chair of Higher Health. And on the international stage, once again as Counselor, a member of the Association of Commonwealth of University. Everyone, Professor Wim de Villiers.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of Stellenbosch University, welcome to the second annual Social Justice Summit, this year taking place online, which has now become the new normal in this time of COVID-19. Stellenbosch University is honored to be associated with the Social Justice Summit. As you know, it's the brainchild of Professor Thuli Madonsela, who holds the Law Trust Chair in Social Justice in our Faculty of Law. Congratulations, Professor Madonsela, with yet again putting together a formidable program. This event brings together an impressive array of people and groupings interested in advancing social justice, a cause which is certainly most important, even more so in 2020. What was supposed to be a time of perfect 2020 vision turned into a nightmare following the outbreak of coronavirus disease 11 months ago. The pandemic has since claimed more than 1 million lives worldwide, including more than 19,000 in South Africa. The pandemic has claimed more than 1 million lives worldwide, including more than 19,000 in South Africa. And the livelihoods of more than 1 billion people have been threatened in the wake of economic fallout from the crisis. Just in South Africa alone, nearly 3 million jobs were lost between February and April alone, and more than a decade's worth of employment growth was wiped out in the first 6 months of the year. Shocking as these results are, they are but some of the findings of a collaborative project tracking the socio-economic impact of COVID-19 in our country, led by Stellenbosch University researchers. Other disturbing findings are that the rates of not only hunger, but also mental health issues such as depression have doubled compared to the time before COVID-19, and that 40% of school days will be lost for most children in South Africa this year. What do we do in the face of such devastation? That is a question that speaks directly to social justice, as does the theme of this summit: all hands on deck to leave no one behind in the post-COVID-19 recovery agenda. Before the coronavirus crisis, we were already straining under the weight of what I always call the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse: unemployment, poverty, inequality, corruption. Now the challenges are so much larger. What to do? What to do? Well, that's what we are here to discuss, aren't we? One thing's for certain, and that is that we have our work cut out for us. And speaking of cut out, let me share an exciting development with you. Yesterday, we unveiled a new art installation in front of the old main building on our Stellenbosch campus, housing our Faculty of Law. It's a very interesting piece. It consists of 3 large metal plates with a preamble to the Constitution of South Africa, cut out using laser technology in 3 languages: Afrikaans, English, and isiXhosa. The project is part of Stellenbosch University's drive to create a more inclusive institution. Celebrating the Constitution is perfect for this purpose because it lays the foundation for a democratic and open society in South Africa. And the principle of transformative constitutionalism is central to contemporary legal education. The art installation will serve as a constant reminder that we've come a long way, both in South Africa and at Stellenbosch University. But that does not mean we have arrived, that nothing more remains to be done. To the contrary, the attainment of social justice, human rights, improving people's quality of life building national unity, the attainment of the very ideals mentioned in the preamble to the Constitution remain work in progress. So we have our work cut out for us, literally. At Stellenbosch University, we have made a commitment to be a force for good in the transformation of South Africa into a place of opportunity for all, a place of shared prosperity, and a place where there's sustainable, peaceful coexistence. That is a clear break with our past and a commitment to help create a better future for all of us by tackling the grand challenges of society. There are many, but at the global level, the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, set by the United Nations, provide a useful outline of societal challenges to focus on. The overall drive is to, quote, end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity. Now, as I said at this summit last year, the thing about societal challenges is that they cannot be solved in isolation. We all have to work together to find solutions. We have representatives of various sectors at this summit. We must all do our part. Universities, the rest of civil society, the state, and also business. In order to leave no one behind in the post-COVID-19 recovery agenda, the M Plan for Social Justice needs a strong condition that seeks to end poverty and drastically reduce structural inequality. So friends, the stage is set for meaningful engagement today. I wish you all fruitful discussions. Thank you very much.
Good day, everyone. Welcome to the second Social Justice Summit. We're overjoyed to share this moment with you and are grateful that you took the time to be part of this project. We're not as many as we would have liked to have been, but it was Margaret Mead who said that it takes a handful of people to change the world. And others say it takes small drops of water coming together to create the mighty ocean. Well, I do hope that, firstly, you're going to have fun discussing the issues around social justice, but ultimately I do hope that we'll come out of this room understanding what exactly is the Social Justice M Plan, what is it trying to change, what is my role, your role, and the role of other people who might not even be in this room in making the social justice plan a reality. I also hope that we'll come out of this room with clear commitments on implementing the M Fund. We have an array of speakers that will be talking to us about pressing challenges on social justice in South Africa, such as the land question, poverty, education, health, and of course, data analytics. How do we use data science to predict the future so that we don't continue to design policies that will exacerbate poverty and inequality, and instead we predict the future and avoid policies that will exacerbate existing social injustices. The M Plan started with research commissioned by Stellenbosch University as part of the social justice chair, but it gets its name from the influences of two women. The first woman was an Irish grandmother I met in Salzburg when I told her that I am going to work on designing apps and other innovative tools that policymakers would use to make sure that they design policies that are not indifferent to difference and disadvantage. And this grandmother said, what happens to the existing inequality? Why don't you have a Marshall Plan that deals with not just law reform, but also deals with economic transformation and the transformation of attitudes, the same way that the original Marshall Plan changed the world? We brought up the idea, and then when I met with women at Cornhill, one of the women at that workshop, which was about women healing the divisions of the past, was Palesa Musa, who had been detained at the age of 12 in 1976 and was now very poor. But she was working hard, and what was amazing about her was that she was still dedicating her life to making this place a better world. So I met her at the women's jail in Cornhill. The women in the room decided that this idea of a Marshall Plan of some sort is a great plan, but let's ditch the Marshall part because it's some guy that we never met. Why don't we then substitute Palesa Musa for General Marshall? And hence the idea of a Marshall Plan. Instead of calling it a Marshall Plan, we called it a Musa Plan for Social Justice.
Yeah, I believe the M-Plan for Social Justice is a wonderful initiative, and it's important for a number of reasons. South Africa is now, 26 years into our transition, and we have significant challenges. These challenges include its inequality, its poverty, its unemployment, and corruption. So I call these the four horsemen of the apocalypse.
What we require most in South Africa at the moment is ambition. In particular, a broad vision that stretches our imagination way beyond what we currently tend to think is viable.
The timing of the Social Justice Summit couldn't have been more appropriate, given the fact that we're still reeling from the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. If there's one thing that the coronavirus COVID-19 has made clear, it's that we are a hugely unequal society, and that there is unconscionable levels of poverty. And a discussion on social justice doesn't only deal with the inequality and poverty that existed before COVID-19, but it gives us an opportunity to really reflect together and build better together.
So we've got a grand plan here. It's a worthwhile plan. How do we now give life to this? How do we make this happen? And I think this is what David Cooper has referred to in the past as the so-called the quadruple helix. And how do we make this work? Because yes, universities, we generate knowledge and we show a lens on certain issues and we offer suggestions, but we can't make this happen in isolation. We're part of a bigger group. We're part of government, of civil society, and also of industry. So together with those three, the university forms part of a so-called a quadruple helix, that we all need to be a team going forward to help solve this issue.
In times of adversity, like the time we're going through, it's very easy to become despondent and lose hope. It's also easy to get angry and start blaming others, especially people who don't look like us. But we are a resilient nation. And if we look back at where we come from as a country, we'll realize that when we faced adversity together, recognized the challenges we had, and joined hands, we triumphed. Of course, now we can't literally join hands, but we can figuratively join hands as the M Plan asks us to. And if we do so, 2021 will start looking better, and by 2030, poverty will be history and structural inequality would have been reduced visibly. One of the pillars of the M Plan is an M Fund. It's basically a community chest to fund the acceleration of progress toward ending poverty and reducing structural inequality by 2030. We know that many people are doing great work in advancing social justice by reducing poverty and reducing inequality. The M Plan seeks to contribute to such initiatives by investing in a ground-up approach where communities in all of the 4,392 wards dream about the future they want in line with the Sustainable Development Goals, and then they are assisted to lift themselves up into sustainable development and socio-economic inclusion. Right, if you want to make a difference for social justice, firstly, play your part in ending poverty and inequality through everyday justice. Educate members of your family and others about do's and don'ts to reduce poverty and reduce inequality. This includes just reducing or ending everyday discrimination. And if there are little projects in your village or wherever you live where you can join hands with others to do something, please join. But our biggest request from you is please be part of the formal social justice M Plan. So how do you contribute to the M Fund? If you go shopping, make sure that you donate at the outlets that will be asking you to donate, and you can donate as little as R5, because it is the little droplets that come together to form the mighty ocean. Of course, we're not confining you to R5. You can donate more. But the whole idea is that every ordinary person can play a role in pulling together resources that will make sure that no one is left behind. Thank you for joining us. My wish for you and for all of us is that we come out of this summit with a sense of burning optimism, a sense of believing that we can achieve social justice, we can reduce inequality, we can end poverty, and we can work together in reflecting about where we are, resetting our journey, and building better together.
Professor Thuli Madonsela, colleagues, greetings, and I thank you for inviting me to be part of this Social Justice Summit of 2020. I also thank you for choosing to focus on SDGs and COVID-19. Thank you for mobilizing intellectual and financial resources in order to support the acceleration of implementation of SDGs and mitigation of the impact of COVID-19. 2020 to 2030 is a decade of action. It has been declared by the Secretary General after realizing that we were not on track for meeting the goals of the Agenda 2030, as well as delivering on the SDGs. But with COVID-19, the situation is even more dire. We therefore need this added intervention in order to move the agenda forward. Poverty is likely to deepen as a result of COVID-19. In fact, we are already seeing, I'm sure we see also in South Africa, how poverty has deepened as a result of COVID-19. We are expecting 47 million people to fall into poverty as a result of COVID-19. And young women between the ages 24 and 35 are worst affected because of their reproductive responsibility. Young children, bearing children, and at the same time needing to go and work but unable to hold a job in some cases because of their unpaid care responsibilities. For every 100 young men who are going to be thrown into extreme poverty, there will be 117 young women. And these are people who need second chances. They are young enough to be salvaged out of poverty. To leave them and give up on them would mean that we are designing the next generation of poor people for the world. And I hope this is not something we will take light and leave unattended. Climate change is also upon us, and many of the people who are caught up in the areas where climate change is causing havoc are thrusted into poverty. We are in difficult situation, especially in areas where there is the impact of climate change together with conflict and wars. And the number of people who are poor and struggling to survive as a result of climate change has increased drastically. And on gender equality, we are seeing that young women in both developed and developing countries, again this age group of 24 to 35, is the most vulnerable group in all countries, from the United States of America to Bangladesh. And of course, in many countries, there's also intersection. If you're black or indigenous or rural, you are worse off. Some of the measures strongly recommended to address the feminization of poverty is education, fair and equal wages, access to family planning, and access to cash transfers. When governments are announcing fiscal stimulus to provide relief from COVID, it is absolutely important that we pay attention to the fact that these will be accessed by women in the informal sector, by women-owned businesses, by women in households that are headed by women, and that also when there's social protection measures, women are targeted as a critical group. Of course, under COVID, we've also seen women being highly affected by gender-based violence, again, the burden of care. And women also are affected because the sectors that are bleeding job as a result of COVID are the sectors in which women are highly represented. It's the service sector, tourism, hospitality, and the care services. We therefore are urging that you assist with collecting data to assist governments to make evidence-based policy changes to monitor and to ensure that there is effective implementation. We also would urge that while we do this work, we are inclusive so that young academics, Black academics, and women are also part of this work so that we are also able to reflect their lived experience as best as possible, and of course fortify their intellectual prowess as well. I thank you for inviting me, and I wish you good luck.
Hello once again, and thank you so much for staying with us. A little recap of what we've done so far. You saw earlier Professor Madonsela having a conversation with the rector about the M plan, and we'll be having a further conversation about that later on in this program. But we also want to thank very much Ms. Phumzile Mlambo Ngcukashi is the United Nations Under-Secretary General and Executive Director of UN Women for that amazing message. We also have a social media interaction. Our hashtags today, hashtag MFund or hashtag SDG10 or hashtag social justice. Those are the hashtags you can use to interact with this program on social media. But some of the people who've already logged in have been complaining about the ability to move about our programs. Just on the main screen, there's a navigation button that allows you to go through to different screens, go through there, tap back on that, go into the conversation that you want to go into. But remember, once you've gone into a specific conversation, you need to come out of it later on. So you need to go back, press the back to the agenda button to allow you to get back into the conversation once again. We hope that this helps. But right now, we're excited. Our keynote speaker is already logged on and ready to go on. Minister Ronald Lamola obtained his LLB from the University of Venda in 2005. He has a practical legal training from University of South Africa in 2006. He has a postgraduate certificate in corporate law from UNISA. He holds a graduate certificate in banking law and financial markets, an LLM in corporate law from the University of Pretoria, 2013 to 2014. Minister Lamola's first master's degree was in corporate law when he explored the regulation of property syndication schemes. He got his second master's in extractive law in Africa from the University of Pretoria in 2018. He's the former deputy president of the African National Congress Youth League. He sits in two of its most powerful structures, that is the NEC and the National Working Committee. He was elected to the NEC at the December 2017 conference. Let's welcome Minister Lamola. Thank you so much for making the time, Minister. You may begin your presentation.
Thank you very much for extending an invitation to me to be part of such a probing and thoughtful discussion. I say probing and thoughtful because at the core of this discussion, one is required to assess to what extent have we been able to implement and integrate the Sustainable Development Goals in South Africa, and perhaps more precisely into our justice system. In his acclaimed book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Paul Freire argues that As the encounter of women and men seeking to be more fully human, dialogue cannot be carried on in a climate of hopelessness. If the dialoguers expect nothing to come of their efforts, their encounters will be empty and sterile, bureaucratic and tedious. I have no doubt that this discussion is not taking place in a climate of hopelessness. On the contrary, we are now seeing more hope as a result of the actions of state institutions which ensure that the wheels of justice spare no one. Everyone who converts the great will of society and abuses public power for their personal benefit must have their days before the corridors of justice. At times, this may be a long, tedious, and bureaucratic process, but it is not a sterile one. All public resources must reach the intended beneficiaries in every rand and cent. I believe that the state must be a conduit of social justice. In other words, the role of the state, amongst other things, is to deepen equality in our society. Although we as a nation state celebrate 25 years of a constitutional and a democratic state, we must be honest, obtaining social justice is still elusive in various communities and spheres of our society. Politically, equality is afloat, but social justice requires a substantial amount of work. As I'm fond of saying, although we may celebrate the fact that we have the greatest constitution in the world, the constitution still requires significant amount of implementation. The constitution must be felt and touched by people in Pofada, Thohoyandou, Mcanduli, and in each and every part of our country. As a result, social justice is that which our fellow South Africans must experience and touch. Data is said to be the lifeblood of a decision-making and the raw material for accountability. In the age of the fourth industrial revolution, analysis of big data is commonplace, with consumer profiling, personalized services, and predictive analysis being used for marketing, advertising, and management. Similar techniques could be adopted to gain real-time insights into people's well-being and to target aid interventions to vulnerable groups from a government perspective. According to the United Nations, new sources of data, such as satellite data, new technologies, and new analytical approaches, if applied responsibly, can enable more agile, efficient, and evidence-based decision-making and can better measure progress on the Sustainable Development Goals in a way that is both inclusive and fair. In our context, there is a significant convergence between South Africa's National Development Plan and the SDGs. According to an unpublished analysis by the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation and the United Nations Development Programme, the UNDP, 74% of the SDG targets are directly addressed by the NDP, and sectoral programs addresses 19% of the remaining targets. The 2030 agenda and its SDGs are realized within the context of South Africa's medium and long-term development planning, which commenced with the Reconstruction and Development Program in 1994. The RDP's overreaching aim was to mobilize all people and the country's resources towards the final eradication of the results of the apartheid by building a democratic, non-racial, non-sexist future. In essence, it was a policy designed to usher in social justice. Underlying the RDP was the notion of social transformation, which included redressing apartheid political and economic inequalities through meeting basic needs, poverty eradication, democratization, redistribution, and securing human rights. According to State South Africa's Living Conditions Survey, more than 1 out of every 5 adults were living below the food poverty line in 2015, while a third, 33.8%, were living below the lower bounds poverty line and approximately half, 40%, were living below the upper bound poverty line. A South African's likelihood of being trapped in poverty is to a large extent determined by gender, race, and location. The NDP aims to eliminate poverty and reduce inequality by 2030 by reducing the proportion of households with monthly income below 419 per person from 39% to 0, and to reduce the Gini coefficient from 0.69 to 0.60. To achieve this, the plan emphasizes inclusive economic growth. The NDP also provides a long-term strategy to increase employment. It identifies a number of sectors through which employment and opportunities can be created. These include education, vocational training, and work experience, public employment programs, health and nutrition, and public transport, among others. To reduce the effects of poverty in the short term, the NDP made a number of proposals. As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, at the core of us implementing the NDP, and as a consequence, the SDGs and government's ability to interpret the data before it. For instance, social security grants based on Section 24 of the Constitution through 29 of the Bill of Rights recognize the socio-economic rights of South African people. It is estimated that 71.9% of elderly people received an old age pension by 2015, while 92.2% of those classified as poor received social grants. Child support grants were provided to 34.3% of households with children. This is a direct link to poverty reduction as per the SDG, and ultimately the reduction of inequality in our communities. Data provides an important means for government to not only assess progress, but also develop important policy perspectives. For instance, it can be of great use on our mortality rates. One is then able to devise policy to address drinking and driving problems, the accessibility of firearms in our communities, or even the importance of ensuring that universal health coverage in the form of NHI is a success. Chair, one of our priorities as this administration is to ensure that we review old era legislations. We have to complete the project that has been started by the Law Reform Commission in this regard. And society can play a great role to help us to finalize this project. Given the political orientation and objectives of the apartheid regime, it is conceivable that some of the legislations we have inherited still hold deeply embedded unconstitutional values in them. Data is like oxygen for policy development and the attainment of social justice in our context. Through Stats SA, we have the means to really analyze, collate, and develop the data necessary to drive the necessary change. But one thing is clearer, in the last couple of years in particular, our quest as a nation for social justice has been suffocated by corruption. If we accept that social justice is described as the fair and compassionate distribution of the fruits of economic growth, then we must agree that corruption is indeed derailed us. To prevent this, it is implied that one must enjoy some level of political integrity. Therefore, addressing corruption is a substantial element of social justice, because corruption and maladministration is the direct antithesis of social justice. It creates victims of theft. As President Mandela once said, history from time to time brings to the fore the kind of leaders who seize the moment, who cohere the wishes and aspirations of the oppressed. We South Africans have succeeded quite admirably in putting in place policy structures, processes, and implementation procedure for the transformation and development of our country. We ought to vigorously implement policies. We cannot falter. The future of this great nation is in our hands. We have to ensure that every rand and cent count. It reaches the intended beneficiaries. We have to do this by building the capability of the state and of civil society and everyone to enable us to implement that we have said we will implement. Making decisions and policies but failure to implement them is the same as not having made the policies and not as having made the decisions. Thank you very much.
Welcome back. It's taking some effort, but I promise you we will get it right. We really would like to hear what Minister Lamola has to say in this area that really affects his space as well as we enter into the second annual Social Justice Summit from the University of Stellenbosch. But let's now look at Reverend Dr. Thabo Makgoba. His most Reverend, Dr. Thabo Cecil Makgoba, is the Archbishop of Cape Town and Metropolitan of the Anglican Church of Southern Africa since 2008. He was born and spent his early years in Alexandra Township, Johannesburg, and then, after his family was forcibly removed, spent the rest of his childhood in Pimville, Soweto. After his schooling at Orlando High, he studied for BSc at the University of Witwatersrand and then trained as a priest at St. Paul's College in Grahamstown, where he earned a diploma in theology. After ordination, he served in various positions in Johannesburg, in the Anglican Diocese, including at St. Mary's Cathedral and the Church of Christ, the King of Sophiatown, and as the Anglican chaplain at Wits. During this time, he also graduated at Wits with a BA Honours in Applied Psychology and an Masters in Education and Educational Psychology, and lectured at Wits in the Division of Specialized Education and at the Wits College of Education, where he was Dean of Dokando Residence. He was elected Bishop Safagrand of Grahamstown in 2002, serving as Bishop of Queenstown, then as Bishop of Grahamstown in 2004, and as Archbishop in 2008, and was decorated by the Archbishop of Canterbury with the Cross of St. Augustine for his role in the Communion. He has and continues to serve as a board member in a number of NGOs and both ecumenical and interfaith bodies. Since 2012, he is Chancellor of the University of Cape Town. Since moving to Cape Town, he's earned a PhD from the University of Cape Town for a thesis on spirituality in the South African mining workplace. He's also received various degrees, including Doctor of Divinity honoris causa, General Theological Seminary, Episcopal Church in New York in 2009. He's also the Doctor of Divinity, Jure Dignitatis, Huron University College, Ontario for 2013. He has, in recent years, taught MBA students at the University of Cape Town on ethical leadership and stewardship, and is also an executive in residence at the Wits Business School. He served as a commissioner for the Press Freedom Commission under Justice Pius Lang, and has been a panelist and discussion leader at various World Economic Forum meetings in Davos. He's currently the Chancellor of the University of Cape Town, and he has published 3 books, a short autobiographical account, Connectedness, and a workplace spirituality in a mind context, and Faith and Courage, Praying with Mandela. Let's listen to what he has to say.
Dear friends, my apologies for not being able to participate more fully in your proceedings today, but I'm honored to be asked to greet you and wish you well in your deliberations, which are absolutely crucial for our country and for the future of our children and our grandchildren and their generations to come. Congratulations, Professor Madonsela. We still call you the public protector in the country for the sterling work you did in raising the levels of values and accountability, or mutual accountability, whilst you occupied that prestigious office. Congratulations to your team for this initiative and for the work that goes into organizing these summits. As a person of faith, I base our church's advocacy of social justice and the advocacy of the development trust established in my name on the concept of the common good. This concept is one rooted in God's desire that human beings may flourish, or as those in my faith tradition say in the words of John's Gospel, that they may have all life and have it abundantly. Working for the common good means ensuring that everyone has a livable standard of material well-being, enough food, clean water, housing, clothing, health care, and the like. It means that all who are vulnerable will enjoy special protection, and that all will have an education which gives access to jobs. In its widest sense, a society organized for the common good is one which is stable, safe, and just, a society which accords everyone respect materially, emotionally, spiritually, and intellectually. In the face of the global inequality and discord, working for social justice for the common good was already an urgent priority before the coronavirus struck. It is now even more urgent at the time when we need, as a society, to give top priority to promoting human development and fostering common goals through our support of education, health, and the development of entrepreneurial skills, as well as mentoring and encouraging dialogue in communities. Today's event is particularly timely. The Sustainable Development Goal identify where we have to be in 2020 to create a sustainable world. With these goals that apply universally to all countries and, as we say, globally, we will need to mobilize efforts to end all forms of poverty, fight inequality, and tackle climate change while ensuring that no one is left behind. Each of us today represents our own community, our own section of society. But all of us have a common identity. We are all South Africans, and our nation needs us. It needs us now more than ever before. Speaking to those whom I represent, religious communities have a major impact on the function of society and ultimately on peace. Persons of faith, communities in all our cultures wield greater power. All faiths have in common the objectives of promoting unity, love, compassion, peace, and cooperation. We often don't appreciate fully enough their power in shaping communities and in achieving social cohesion. And being at the forefront of where people from different cultures and faiths meet and cooperate, the interfaith community has the capacity to harness resources to help overcome inequality and poverty and to reduce the potential for conflict in society. When I make these reflections, when there has been the sad stabbing in the cathedral in France, and today the shootings in Vienna. And of course, we know of the challenges that we face globally. And I'm saying, as faith communities, we need to ask ourselves, to what extent can we contribute to plugging the gap in the disparity between the rich and the poor, globally and at home? How can we work hard towards equality of equality? How can we work hard towards equality amongst people? So friends, as you begin your program today, we know that the task ahead of you is a hard one, but I'm confident that you will succeed in sharing insights and practical proposals for the way ahead as you work towards the realization of a world in which social justice is a reality. Thank you, God bless you, God loves you, and so do I.
Welcome back, and thank you so much for staying with us. You're watching the live broadcast of the second annual Justice Summit here at the University of Stellenbosch. It's been quite an exciting morning. I know we've had a glitch here and there, especially trying to connect with the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, but we're working on that, and we'll bring you that as soon as it's possible to do so. But thank you so much for staying with us. Remember our social media hashtags, hashtag MFund, hashtag SDG10, hashtag social justice. And also with the session that we're about to have with Professor Madonsela, you're welcome to interact with us on this conversation. Just go onto the screen, the bottom right hand corner, there's a plus sign there. Just click on that plus sign and you should be able to get going. But let's now start our conversation with the lady who started all of the trouble. Professor Madonsela, thank you so much. You are the Law Trust Chair in Social Justice and M-Plan convener here at Stellenbosch University. How does it feel for you when we keep going back to marking this project that you started?
Greetings, Desiree, and greetings to everyone. I'm overjoyed at everything that we've done to date. It's amazing the generosity with which everyone has received this project. But for me, it just comes together in terms of a song I used to sing as a child, or my church used to sing. I was a Seventh-day Adventist. It was all the colors of the rainbow.
Wow.
At some stage it spoke about everyone, red and white, black and white, will join together and make this world a better place.
Just tell me about that beginning of the program that we had, where we had young South Africans singing the national anthem and then speaking along, reading the full preamble to the Constitution. I thought that was goosebump stuff.
It really gave me goosebumps, and it didn't matter the fact that I had seen it before, because the organizers had shown us the video during the dry run. But I still felt those goosebumps. It just gave me a sense of hope that this is doable, but also that it is really possible to recognize our past and our present, reset together and rebuild together. It's really possible.
Even though it was unrelated, but I arrived in yesterday and you had this beautiful event, the university had this beautiful event of launching artworks related to the preamble, the Constitution, the preamble to the Constitution here at the university, which is quite a momentous achievement for Stellenbosch University. Just tell us about how that ties into the annual Social Justice Summit.
It was a momentous occasion indeed, and it is one of those initiatives by the University of Stellenbosch that is reflective, that recognizes where we are and how the past informs where we are, and the commitment of this university to join hands with all willing South Africans and others to take this country to where the Constitution wants it to be. And the preamble is that vision statement that we all adopted as South Africans and said we don't like who we are or who we had become as a nation, and this is the nation that we want to become. And the university putting it there where every law student who's arriving for the first time will see this preamble and realize that that's the foundation of their legal studies. that social justice lawyering is not just for young people who don't have any serious legal commitment. The social justice lawyering should be part of every
And that
lawyer's
commitment extends into
training.
country commitment.
Exactly, it is, because these lawyers are going to be part of the foundation of the country building. But it is my hope, or it is our hope and dream as Stellenbosch University and as the social justice team, but everyone in this country is going to put the preamble where everyone can read it. And secondly, when they start their meetings, especially policy meetings, they will read this preamble together first, so that they always remind themselves, where are we going?
They can recalibrate.
Exactly, exactly.
Let's talk about the M Plan. It forms a big part of the objectives of the annual Social Justice Summit. What has been achieved so far?
Well, we've achieved a few droplets towards the mighty ocean of social justice, I would say.
Progress.
It's progress. One of the areas of progress is the number of institutions that have opted in has increased. Just look at the program today and look at who's involved nationally and internationally. In other words,
it's an amazing lineup, I must say.
Exactly. This whole Noah's Ark and bringing everyone together is working. The critical mass is increasing. Secondly, we have now invited people to become councillors in the Council for Social Justice that is going to manage this whole program and the M Fund. And thirdly, the M Fund itself is in the process of being established, and we're just waiting for the councillors to sign in as trustees, and then we move forward. And at the level of research, we have moved tremendously. We designed a tool that is called the Social Justice Impact Assessment Matrix. That's the tool that is informed by Constitutional Court decisions, such as the Minister of Finance versus Van Heerden, Batu Star, etc. That just reminds this country that everything you do must first ask the question, will this advance equality? Will this reduce poverty? And if it's not, then it's not in line with the social justice commitment in the Constitution, and therefore you have to rethink. And we're giving you a tool to achieve that. That is the Social Justice Impact Assessment Matrix. It's called SIAM. Last, we're in the process of piloting a social justice project, which is about poverty and equality mapping. We have an agreement with SALGA, that is the South African Local Government Association. We have an agreement with the Municipality of Swartland, and we are just waiting for the Ethics Committee at the university to make sure that we don't harm anyone in the pursuit of goodness, and we will be good to go very soon.
So there's tremendous progress.
They have. Oh, we also formed SCOPRA, which was a think tank, a smaller think tank of our social justice community that was monitoring COVID-19 policy and relief responses. And from that, we have come up with several policy instruments that we've sent to government to say, okay, we know you're doing a great job and we know you intend to ensure that we all come out better out of COVID-19, but the science is not working as well as it should. Here's what you should be looking at.
In fact, the tail ender there for you goes into the question I was going to ask you. What is government and the Solidarity Fund, as well as the M Plan, doing to accelerate economic inclusion in the country and the well-being in terms of social justice? Perhaps let's incorporate that into that response.
Absolutely. Well, I think government has been doing its best, and despite the fact that we've become the most unequal country in the world and poverty is at unbelievable levels, today is better than yesterday if you look at the picture holistically. The Solidarity Fund...
Really, Prof?
If you look at the picture holistically, and you know that...
I'm just sitting here thinking
from a data
people's
point of
real life lived experiences might not reflect that.
They don't, but let's take Balisa Musa, whose life story is captured in the Musa Plan for Social Justice. She certainly is poor, But at least she can leave Soweto and come to Joburg, to Cornhill, to tell her story without anybody stopping her and asking for a pass. She can sleep well at night without anybody kicking the door. The blackjack, not your generation, my generation, there were those blackjacks that would kick the door open and people had to hide behind it.
Trust me, I felt their wrath during my childhood. I couldn't make sense of it, but yes.
You see that? So yes, I do know that people would say I'm speaking from privilege, which is true. I'm one of those who have received the low-lying fruits of democracy. And you're right, that's why we're talking about all hands on deck to leave no one behind, because there's been improvement, but there's patchwork.
How much emphasis do we put on making South Africans aware of those little incremental improvements?
Well, I think this process, the Social Justice M Plan, provides a vehicle to bring all of the little lights together. I meet a whole lot of people who are paying fees for someone, people who are providing accommodation for free to someone, people who are feeding people. And we do that. I do all of these, all of the above, but it's all little lights all over the place. And the idea of having this Social Justice M Plan is twofold. Let's connect those lights. Let's connect those droplets and build a mighty ocean where the visible difference that you were asking about can be seen and felt by everyone. So that's the first thing, a systemic approach to it. But the second thing also is let no one fall through the cracks. I've said everything is improved, but if you go to a community like Kamandi, which is here, it's got 4 wards here in Stellenbosch, they haven't felt a lot of the change that we want to see. If you go to a community in KZN that is called Emanzimeleni, they haven't felt the change. For example, they asked for they asked for a community garden and a community center. They got a stadium and toilets. So this kind of M Plan would say, okay, if government wants to build toilets in the stadium, that's fine. But as part of...
Is it serving this particular community?
Well, we will assist government in 2 ways, which is plan with the end in mind. That is the CM, that tool that I spoke about, is go back to the Constitution.
No vanity projects.
That vision. Yeah, because even some of them, Desiree, are not even vanity. It's just they're not impact informed. They're trying to do the right thing, but the science, that's why
and they don't reach scale as well.
Exactly. That's why we say use data analytics so that intentions are not enough. Impact is enough. So we have the good intentions, also have a good impact. And that's where we've started with Swartland. I mean, we're not suggesting government was doing the wrong thing. We're just saying the impact might not be what you're wanting, because as you plan, ask yourself, where are women? Where are young people? Where are older persons, disabled people, people of foreign origins, all of these groups? And if you implement this policy, will their lives get better? Will their lives get worse? Who's going to benefit from this policy? Because often you come up with a policy, let's say, for example, the feeding schemes, I was speaking with a colleague of mine, we're together at Harvard, and she was saying to me, now they've said to people, apply for farms. Who's going to apply for farms?
Yeah.
My helper, who needs a farm, is she going to apply for a farm? She hasn't even seen that advert. But me, who doesn't even need this farm, I'm going to be able to apply. So you then have to use mechanisms that meet people where they are so that you leave no one behind.
So when we're putting so much emphasis on the M Plan, which is part of the National Development Plan, and there's conversation about whether the development plan is still relevant or if government is still committed to it, what sort of conversations are you having with government about making sure that you're all on the same page?
We've had great conversations. When we launched this M Plan for Social Justice, the President delegated to the Minister of Planning, who came, Jackson Mthembu. After that, I remember when it was the day after the SONA this year, they came, the team from the National Planning Division came to Stellenbosch
Oh,
University
wow.
to meet with us. So that's how committed they are to talk to us. But we're not only looking at national government, we're talking to Swartland municipality, we're talking to everyone, because for us, leaving no one behind is not about choosing a government for the people. People have to choose their own government. With us, we work with whoever to make sure that we plan better, do better.
Happens.
And we leave no one behind. Not just on poverty, though. We leave no one behind also on equality. We're not saying
on all
that
the indices of social justice.
Exactly. No, exactly. But other people don't understand that, Desiree. Other people think we're ending poverty. But we are saying no. We are disrupting the inequality that was created by apartheid, but also other inequalities that have emerged as human beings cast others out of the boat. For example, if you're in the LGBTI community, you may have been cast out of the boat, not necessarily because of apartheid, because just humanity tends to do those things, foreigners, etc. So the social justice thing is just about building that inclusive South Africa where everyone belongs, which is what we mean when we say to heal the divisions of the past and establish a society founded on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights, which is what those kids were reading this morning.
You've touched a bit on some of them, but just as the Law Trust Chair, some of the activations you're hoping to work on to take this conversation forward?
Well, firstly, it is the social justice mapping that I've spoken about. But the big issue today is the launch of the M Fund. So that's the biggest activation we want to see. We want everyone to opt in South Africa. And we're not asking for huge amounts of money. There are two things that we're asking from South Africa. We're asking those who have retail outlets to lend us their collecting points so that we can have an app there that allows you to donate to the fund. The second thing we're asking is me, you, and even children to donate a minimum of R5 when you see the sign of the Social Justice M Fund. Because it's the concept
Imagine what would
behind
happen if 50% of South Africans donated.
Exactly. In fact, in the concept plan that was done when I was still at Harvard, because, you know, Stellenbosch enrolled me before I left for Harvard, and then I was allowed to go. We did actually an estimation of how those little droplets of money can do wonders. Ethiopia built a whole dam by just getting people.
The contentious dam.
Well, they might not be.
That's another conversation.
But I think the point, though, that you're learning from there is we're always looking for big donors, and we're not saying big donors should not come in.
But all hands on deck, as you say.
I mean, if you think about tradition, Ubuntu, because this project is really about Ubuntu, human solidarity. Think about ancient societies. Whenever somebody was sick, each one came and did what Richard Mabaso called Imbumba. In Siswati, we call Lilima. In other words, we don't give you charity, but we hold your hand and work with you to lift yourself up.
So you can stand on your own.
Exactly. But why are we doing that? We're doing it for ourselves because the African notion of coexistence has always been about we're stronger together. Like Stellenbosch University says, we're stronger together. It's more like elephants. Elephants will help an elephant that is in trouble, will cry when an elephant
is in distress,
dead, even if it's not from their tribe, because they know that when they work together, they stronger
so much more.
Exactly, against everything else. And this is the same thing as the Sustainable Development Goals, is leverage every human being, every community, release everyone in your country from the shackles of poverty and underdevelopment is your key to sustainable development, growth, and advancement as a nation.
Yeah.
Yes.
What are some of the most exciting milestones you've achieved? Well, of course, you announcing the M Fund today. That's very, very exciting. But just other activities.
I would say one of the milestones, of course, was the SCOPRA, because we became the people's eye when it came to what was happening. We hadn't planned, but because we already were a think tank on social justice, when COVID-19 came, we were quick to realize that the existing social cleavages, the existing disparities were going to be exacerbated by lockdowns, and poor people were going to be more affected. Or those who are in the margins of society. And SCOPRA, we've made submissions, and we do think that we've been part of the impact of those submissions. For example, when the 350 rand was being reconsidered, we were part of the groups that said, please keep it. But we know that that's palliative care. That's really just giving people Panado. Sustainable development is about making sure we find out why are people poor and how do we help them to be lifted out of poverty, but not just to be just out of poverty. How do we create a country where everyone is prospering? So that's what we've done, as I said.
And can self-sustain.
Exactly. And I also said we created that instrument that's called SIAM, that is receiving quite a lot of attention around an instrument for social change. So if you're saying, how do I measure if this thing is in line with the Constitution or not? SIAM says, here are the 9 dimensions you have to look at. Who is this policy for? Who's going to benefit? So often you don't ask that. You're just saying it's a policy for the nation. You say, will it exacerbate existing disparity? Will it reduce inequality? Will it reduce poverty? Whose life is going to be made easier to comply? Who will find it more easier to, for example...
And once you answer those questions, you're able to move forward.
Exactly. We even say, if, for example, there's no other policy you can adopt, because this is the only policy possible in the circumstances, what's your compensation strategy? In other words, you don't wait for your compensation strategy when your policy has flattened people to the ground. For example, some of the services we took to digitalize with students, for example, we digitalized. Only when we had already digitalized, taken everything online, we discovered some don't have digital instruments or digital devices, some don't have data, some are living in areas where there isn't connectivity at all. Even if you do have your cell phone, you do have data. So all of those things we know.
Those responses.
We're part of that conversation, and I think above everything else, for me, I will tell you something, Desiree. It is the fact that this nation is awakening to this word social justice. If you think about before this project, social justice has always been in our constitution, and our constitution repeatedly say we're aiming for 3 things.
But we weren't engaging with it actively.
Exactly. Yeah. We're aiming for a socially just society. We're aiming for a society based on democratic values. We're aiming for a society based on human rights. And we're only prepared to talk about human rights. Even that conversation has died over the years. But I think social justice is in the lips of everyone today.
But we also realize it requires work.
Exactly. Yeah. Because you can't really achieve what you don't aim for. You can't
just
achieve
out of
what
interest,
you don't.
how has the COVID-19 outbreak disrupted your work in terms of how you were coming along?
Well, it did. For example, look at where we are. We were struggling with technology, organizing this.
When we could be having a live audience.
Exactly. Last year we had a fantastic audience, and the energy. I remember Bon Turok saying, he never in his life... May his
soul rest in peace.
Yes, may his soul rest in peace. He must be smiling at us right now. And he was saying, never in his wildest dreams did he ever think that he could be in a room where people who have so many differing views about South Africa are together, but they are agreeing on one thing, that we need to achieve social justice. The shadow of the past is still with us, and all of us should join hands to do that. And this plan that we're talking about was adopted by everyone in the room without any reservation.
Is that the kind of feedback that drives you to continue?
It really does. The whole idea that nobody really wakes up in the morning, well, very few people do that, wakes up in the morning and say, I want other people to suffer in this world.
True.
People do things that they think, this is going to help me, and I call it just us approach. And they do say we evolve like that as human beings. At the starting point, you're only concerned about what's just to you and what's just to people like yourself. And engagement helps people to understand that as long as there's injustice somewhere, there can't be sustainable peace anyway. So if you push justice as just us, you end up where we ended up under apartheid,
Yeah.
where there's fracture, but also we can't develop fully because we're leaving a whole lot of people who should be part of our development strategy behind.
Prof, we've just got 2 minutes to go. I just want to ask you, government has endorsed the M Plan
Yes.
During the 2019 Social Justice Summit. Are there any challenges that have dampened progress? But as you answer that, I also
Yes.
want to know what are the next steps after the summit with regards to the M Plan and the M Fund?
I think there was one challenge that may have dampened progress unintentionally. When COVID-19 came, the Solidarity Fund was formed. And you will recall that already there was the approval of the Social Justice M Plan. We had to go back to the drawing board and say...
Reprioritization.
Yeah, and also to say, do we still need an M Plan? Do we still need an M Fund, given the fact that we have the Solidarity Fund? And we came to the conclusion, working with everyone, including our Vice Chancellor, Wim de Villiers,
and it's great that you have the chair of the Solidarity Fund
Yes.
talking later to clarify even further.
Absolutely. We thought we need both. They can complement each other because the Solidarity Fund is looking at everyone being carried forward. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, but if you've been impacted by COVID-19, let's help you. Whereas the Social Justice M Plan is only dealing with everyone who's poor. It doesn't matter what color they are, what gender they are. If you're poor, we don't want anybody to be poor by 2030. That's SDG 1. It's also looking at inequality. It doesn't matter what caused that inequality, but we know that most of that inequality was caused by our unjust laws of the past. That's why today we'll be talking about land, we'll be talking about economic inclusion, financial access, etc. So we concluded that we still need to do these things. But why we have invited the Solidarity Fund's colleagues, it's part of what the Vice Chancellor Wim de Villiers said this morning, is that nobody can ever achieve anything alone. Society is like a body. And in your body, you can't have your foot working against the head or the hand working. You need everything to join together so that the body is healthy and it moves in one direction.
That's a very important point that you raise about nobody doing anything alone. But there's always concerns about these kind of interactions being very higher grade and intellectual and leaving out the people they're meant to benefit. How do you make sure you bring in that component as you work on achieving what you set out to do?
Absolutely right, Desiree. And that takes me to the concern you made earlier about what else happened that disrupted our plans. One of the plans was an everyday justice project. That's part of the M Plan process, where we train our students to go to communities and educate them about the architecture of our democracy, starting with the preamble to the Constitution, and then explain also the M Plan so that people can become a social accountability bulwark, holding us accountable, holding government accountable, but playing their part also in moving South Africa to the socially just country that the Constitution wants it to be.
Prof, we got caught up in our conversation. I nearly forgot about the questions we asked some of our participants to send through. Let's look at the screen. One says, what's the next step after the summit? Okay, we've had that one. The other one, all right, we don't seem to have any more. All right, we've responded to those responses. But Prof, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, but I've got to notice that we're swiftly running out of time.
Right. Well, my request is to say to every South African, I know that most people are doing something to improve social justice by trying to end poverty and end inequality. It could be helping a relative with food, with accommodation, with transport, with school, and with medical services. It could be helping total strangers. So everyone is doing something, but we're asking every South African, wherever you are, let's join hands this time so that we leave no one behind. Because when we all do this good work, often we over-concentrate resources in one place, and then other places
at the expense of others.
Behind. But the other important thing about the Social Justice M Plan is it's not about us altruistically helping people. It's about us helping people
recognize
help
that they have the capability
they
themselves.
have the agency. Exactly. It's a ground-up approach.
Wow.
So we use the science that we have to help communities understand the Sustainable Development Goals.
That is
and
so
lift
important.
themselves up, but then connect them to resources in government, to resources in business, but also the social justice fund, the M fund will be like an impact investment fund where we don't invest randomly. We invest, we've looked at Swartland, we invest in a dream, where Swartland has already looked at what does it look like by 2010, and how does this fund help them to get there.
Yeah. And as you say, you need the resources,
yes.
And that's where the M Fund will come in later on in the program.
Absolutely. And then also the other area. So it's looking at two things: 4,392 municipal wards, ground-up approach based on SDGs, focusing on 10, 1, and 2. But secondly, education. My mom used to say education is the greatest leveler. In fact, I thank my mom. I was a university dropout at some stage. My mom kept sending me back.
Can't even imagine that.
I was. Honestly, a camera. So, again, let's make sure that we put in that 5 rand if we can, but we also just be part of this energy system that says we need everyone on board for all our sakes, which is part of Ubuntu.
So, of course, we're going to tell everybody later on in terms of details about how to contribute.
Yes, we need your support, whoever you are, wherever you are. Yes, thank you. That's right.
The University of Stellenbosch Law Trust Chair in Social Justice and MPlan convener, Professor Thuli Madonsela. Thank you so much. And that brings us to almost the end of the first segment, but we are going to bring in Professor Nicholas Smit to do that for us, the professor of the Professor of Law and Dean for Faculty of Law, Stellenbosch University. Nicholas Smit started her academic career as a junior lecturer at UNISA. She joined the University of Johannesburg in 1996, where she also served as the Vice Dean of the UJ Faculty of Law. In 2013, she joined the NWU Faculty of Law as Executive Dean of Potchefstroom. Professor Smit has been a Dean and Professor at Law at the Faculty of Law here at Stellenbosch since August 2017. Her areas of specialization include labor law, both collective and individual, and special security law. She is an NRF-rated researcher, and she publishes widely, delivers presentations at national and international conferences, and although she does not currently teach at undergraduate level, she continues to supervise postgraduate students in the fields of labor and social security. Professor Smit will be talking to us in a moment.
Program Director, Honorable Minister Lamola, our host, Professor Thuli Madonsela, speakers of this first session, as well as delegates who are attending virtually today. It is a great honor for us to welcome you at the second annual Social Justice Summit. And I want to thank the first session speakers, including, of course, the Executive Director of UN Women, Dr. Phumzile Mhlambu-Ngcuka, Archbishop Makgoba, and Professor Wim de Villiers for their thoughtful contributions this morning. And I also want to confirm that Minister Lamola's presentation will be aired a little bit later when we've managed to address all the challenges that we've experienced. Now, as highlighted by our speakers, the impact of COVID-19 makes this summit even more timely and relevant and important than ever before. As a nation, we indeed need to reflect, reset, reimagine, and rebuild our current positions, policies, our safety nets, our support, as well as our chosen pathway to realizing social justice for all. Archbishop Makgoba actually formulated this very well by saying that we need to trust ourselves. We need to have hope, and we need to believe that we can succeed. Constitutional Court Justice Leona Theron in 2018 wrote in a short contribution, Leadership, Social Justice and Transformation, Leaders, that the rights captured in our Bill of Rights, such as the right to equality, access to housing, health, education, water, and many other social rights, are the foundation for social justice to be achieved. And this is, of course, a rights-based approach, because of these, the delivery of these rights, social justice can in fact be achieved. Human rights litigation is therefore an important mechanism to use in achieving social justice. However, we all know that litigation is timely, it's also costly, and therefore more recently we have realized that this is not the only or perhaps even the best route to follow to pursue social justice for all. An important point underlined today is therefore that in order to achieve social justice, it is indeed all hands on deck. And due to our limited resources and the impact of things beyond our control, or somewhat beyond our control, like climate change, we need to find ways to mobilize large-scale participation, law reform, and smart processes using relevant data, accurate analytics, etc. And this is, of course, where the M-Plan and also the M-Fund fit in perfectly. We cannot go about our business as usual. The impact of COVID extends to the health of our nation, our economy, poverty in households, especially female-headed households, and income inequality, food security of people, environmental, technological, and educational challenges. All of this means that income inequality increases due to this pandemic, aggravating the already high income disparities in South Africa and compromising South Africa's progress towards attaining targets under the Sustainable Development Goals. And this in turn threatens the already fragile social fabric of our nation. In the socio-economic impact assessment of COVID-19 in South Africa, the UN recommends very clearly that policy interventions need to pay specific attention to those persons hurt the most by COVID-19. It makes sense. Broadly, a strategic thrust in interventions is usually targeted towards those persons most disadvantaged in terms of poverty, inequality, and sectoral and production impacts. The UN also states that a new dimension is that interventions responses mitigating the impact of COVID need to be differentiated by the expected losses and impact of the pandemic. And this includes, for example, that the restructuring package to be directed towards the economy should be to those economic sectors where growth will take place. Or that for households, the intervention should be targeted according to the household poverty level and its gender dimension, as underlined by the UN and emphasized now by Dr. Mklambu Ngcuka. So how is data relevant in this journey? If a microeconomic analysis presents a classification of households in South Africa, for example, that goes beyond the basic poor and non-poor to a ranking that factors in the likelihood of falling into poverty. This classification could, for example, divide the poor into different categories: chronic poor, temporarily poor, and the middle class into categories such as vulnerable and middle class. Then, for example, a stimulus package or social protection could target the businesses and the chronically poor in society. While support to these households is essential, there is the case for other categories of households that should be protected to at least preserve the poverty levels prior to COVID-19. Data will feature in today's program, and Minister Lamola's presentation will also touch upon this issue. As the rector indicated, there are many challenges, but at the global level, the Sustainable Development Goals set by the UN provides us a useful outline to frame these challenges overall as the need to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity. Worryingly, the most recent UN report of South Africa, the Voluntary National Review that was presented on 17 July 2019, In this report, the potential impact of COVID-19 on the achievement of SDGs will build on a report that sets us that South Africa, even pre-COVID-19, struggled or experienced challenges for SDGs 4, 8, 10, 13, 16, and 17. And clearly these challenges will only be aggravated with COVID-19. And this has brought to the forefront, for instance, the challenge of achieving SDG 4, equal education, quality education, and SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. In particular, and of course we felt this very clearly in the case of a university, because of inequality of access, for example, to internet, school and workplace closures, and not all households having access to essential services, to access these educational resources and to be able to continue to work from home. And over and above all of this, we know that the need for significant funding resources will increase. And these resources were already limited prior to COVID-19. It will be much worse in 2020 with many different interest groups requesting funding also to further the SDG goals. So, to conclude, it is therefore an opportune time to bring together experts from different disciplines to deliberate on how we can ensure that no one is left behind. I look forward to the contributions of all the experts over the next couple of sessions, including the parallel sessions this afternoon. And I look forward to hearing how you reimagine our response to pursuing social justice for all. So this concludes the session for this morning. We will now have a short break, and thereafter the program will continue as indicated in the information that you received. I thank you.